Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to this very important session, which is being co hosted by the World Biogas Association and ISWA, titled on unlocking the potential for financing methane mitigation from solid waste for the NDCs and beyond. My name is Pradeep Monga. I'm Senior Advisor and Policy Director at World Biogas Association. It will be my privilege to moderate this session on urgent and often very overlooked area in climate action, that is financing methane mitigation in the solid waste sector. Methane emissions, as many of us know, are highly potent in warming the atmosphere with a global warming potential of more than 80 times that of carbon dioxide over a 20-year period. And that is a crux, because that's where we overlook the potential of methane in mitigating climate change. Solid waste, specifically landfill waste, is one of the largest sources of methane emissions worldwide. With the right focus, smart policies, and targeted action, this sector also holds immense potential for cost effective and impactful mitigation of climate change. Today's discussion is especially relevant as countries strive to meet their nationally determined contributions or NDCs and go beyond them in pursuit of more ambitious climate change. We have no other alternative to be ambitious, bold, thinking out of box. We want climate action on the ground. The financing landscape, however, for methane mitigation in waste management presents both challenges and huge opportunities that need our immediate attention and innovative solutions. Tackling methane emissions, for instance, has the potential to deliver fast and measurable impacts on climate change, buying us valuable time to implement longer term carbon reduction measures. The solid waste sector, which direct methane emissions from landfills, presents a huge opportunity for quick wins, what we call low hanging fruits. Methane mitigation waste sector is not about only emissions reduction, it is about enhancing public health, it is creating jobs in value chain of waste management, and of course, improving community resilience. These benefits add extra incentive for incentives or investments, but require the right policy frameworks to unlock financing, especially from private sector. While the need for financing is critical, there is a considerable gap between available resources and on the ground project development. Traditional financial models often overlook the unique dynamics of methane mitigation, such as smaller scale projects in waste management that require different kind of risk assessments, part of life cycle assessments there, and returns. Yet innovative financial mechanisms like carbon credits for methane reduction or biomethanation certificates or blended financing models could provide innovative solutions that all of us are looking for. For many countries, integrating methane mitigation in the NDCs presents an opportunity to meet their climate targets efficiently. But beyond the NDCs, there's an opportunity to create stronger frameworks for sustainable development by aligning methane reduction with broader environmental and social goals. So our conversation today will focus on bridging the gap. I'm saying conversation because I would request all of you, to the extent possible, let us make it a very interactive session. And that's where I would request audience to be fully participative of that. We'll explore policy and financial frameworks needed, examine the roles of public and private financing and institutions, and discuss the innovative models that can scale investments in methane mitigation in solid waste sector. This event aligns very well with COP29 key agenda item on methane reduction from organic waste. I feel very happy and proud that this COP29 for the first time is coming up with a direct declaration on methane reduction from organic waste, and will contribute to anticipated COP29 declaration, which will aim to accelerate waste sector commitment aligned with the 1.5-degree target, including quantifiable methane reduction targets in national climate policies. As moderator, I'll be guiding discussion to cover several key areas, and some of those questions or areas will be: what financing mechanisms, including banks and capital institutions, are available or could be developed to support methane reduction from solid waste? What policy frameworks are necessary to unlock those financial pathways? And how can we leverage NDC commitments to create a more conducive environment, more level play field for methane mitigation financing? I'm delighted to introduce our esteemed panel of experts who bring a wealth of knowledge from policy, finance, and project implementation backgrounds at international, regional, and national level. They will provide insights into strategies, challenges, opportunities for scaling up finance in this critical area. Let me briefly introduce them from my left onwards. Martina Ott, Head of Secretariat Climate and Clean Air Coalition. Anya Schweze, Scientific Officer and Vice Chair, Working Group CCWM ISWA. She's Scientific Officer, German Environment Agency. Jonathan, we have, I think, Alfred. We have Alfredo now in place of Jonathan Bank. Alfredo Miranda from Clean Air Task Force, LOW, Low Methane Partnership. Yannick Wack, Zero Pollution Manager, Zero Waste Europe, and of course, our own Charlotte Morton, OBE, Chief Executive of World Biogas Association. Let me also recognize here, I hope our colleague from Tanzania is present here, Dr. Hussein M. Amar, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, Tanzania, as special guest at our side event. Welcome, sir. Let us work together in today's discussion to identify solutions that can make a real difference on the ground. Not only discussion here at COP29, but real difference and impact on the ground. I thank you once again for your participation in today's side event and look forward to a very vibrant and insightful conversation. First of all, let me request my colleague and friend, Martina Ott, Head of Climate and Clean Air Coalition, to give a keynote address on the importance and urgency of the global methane pledge. Martina, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pradeep, and a big thanks to the organizers of the session. Looks like I'm eating the. Okay. And it's a pleasure to be here and to see a pretty full room today here as well. Now, let me get started by highlighting the urgency. Cutting super pollutants, including methane, implemented alongside decarbonization efforts is our best chance to keep our collective 1.5 goal alive. And as we see more and more extreme weather events happening all over the globe, we know that the word is out. We have to take action. We have our scientists tell us that maybe over the next 5 years already we'll hit 1.5, which was the limit that we set ourselves to avoid some of those climate tipping points that may come as a point of no return. And addressing methane as a short-lived climate pollutant is absolutely critical because there's an element of time and temperature. And Pradeep said it already, it's over 80 times more potent than CO2 and lives over 20 years in the atmosphere, 10 to 20 years, 12 to 20 years. And that means cutting methane now leads to curbing the near-term warming. And that's why it is so essential to do this. We have to pull this emergency brake on the climate, on the global warming right now. Now, methane is emitted from a number of key sectors, and waste is one of them. Pradeep said it as well. The waste sector contributes almost 20% of the anthropogenic methane. And and it's on the rise. Waste is increasing, and we have to reverse that trend. And in this context, it's important to talk about the Global Methane Pledge. That is a commitment that came out of COP26, was made at the time by about 100 countries, has now grown to 100, almost 160 that have joined the pledge. It's a collective commitment globally to reduce methane by 30% by 2030 from 2020 levels. And that has really brought the topic of methane much higher on the radar. It was not as visible beforehand, and obviously this is not to distract from the decarbonization efforts that we need to see, but it really is a double strategy that we have to do. We talk about we have to run the sprint and the marathon being the deeper changes on just transitions. And obviously there is a deeper change in the waste sector as well, with moving towards circularity, greater circularity. But there's a lot of things that we can do while we are working on that pathway. And that's what the Global Methane Pledge is about in terms of pushing the agenda. We've seen yesterday there was a non-CO2 summit that was held by the presidency together with US and China, with a lot of participation of countries. So really the topic is on our radar. And Pradeep mentioned already the COP29 presidency's initiative with the Reducing Organic Waste Declaration that has been put forward, and that will be launched or presented on the 19th. And it's really important to put the topic on our collective radar, and that's what the presidency has done with it. And what is interesting, very interesting about this declaration is that it adopts the ADWI strategy in a sense, and that's nothing new to people who work in the waste sector, because it's applying the waste hierarchy to the organic waste as well. The idea is to say we obviously have to do methane capture at landfill, because we can't let a resource escape into the air. We need to make sure that this resource, as well, drives energy security rather than driving climate change. We have to make sure that we valorize organic waste and bring it to higher levels, again, to drive economic development rather than driving climate change. And then even further upstream, if we look at food loss and waste, it's a disgrace that on the one side people go hungry while at the same time we let food waste. So we have to feed the planet rather than feeding climate change. And you see there is something that's coming through here. We have to take things upstream as much as we can, avoid, redirect, valorize, and make the infrastructure investments to clean up our landfills as well and harness this resource. And that is really the essence of this declaration. There are 5 priority areas in there, and I will highlight 2. One is not because the others are not important, but because I'm running out of time. The NDC point 3 is super important to include waste very visibly, waste methane measures very visibly. Why? Because it shows political commitment, and the finance will follow the political commitment. The NDC point 3 have to be our investment plans to go forward. So that's how to unlock some of that climate finance that can, in addition, come to complement other finance that's out there to deal with the waste issues. So that's really critical to have targets in there very visibly. And the second point is, and here maybe just to say as well, we have put forward guidance in the CCIC, Climate and Clean Air Coalition partnership of over 180 partners, 90 of them countries. We've put forward guidance how to integrate, including methane, so all the short-lived climate pollutants, into the NDCs. So I encourage everybody to have a look at it. But we haven't stopped at providing guidance. We also run trainings. We provide financial resources to actually help translate that. So we support roadmap development, we support national consultants to help drive the topics within national governments as well. And now to the topic of finance, because that will cover a lot of the work that we will, or the discussions that we will have right now. And one thing is we see too little investment going into the waste sector, the climate or the methane finance that goes into the waste sector, most of that ends up in financing incineration. It doesn't go into the reduction of organic waste, while there is business opportunities in all of that. And here I want to highlight that there is maybe not enough awareness about some of the things that could be done. So there's a perception of risk that we need to address. And here in the CCIC, again, we have this technology and economic assessment panel. And Anya is part of the group as well, because she's a lead of our waste hub and will come to speak later. But here we look at interesting technologies that are underinvested in, and we bring them to the fore. We describe them, but we also look at what kind of business models can work for them, at what kind of scale do these technologies work, and what kind of finance is needed to bring them to scale. And with that, we hope to close a gap between knowledge and finance. That's to deal with a part of the risk. Another area that is critical to look at is that local governments are often enough the ones who have the jurisdiction over what to do on the waste side and have a lot of responsibility. If we look at investments on the infrastructure side, we do need central government guarantees at the very minimum to unlock some of that finance. How do we mobilize these things, this collaboration between the different levels of government much more? And here, we have Low M that was created also at a COP. It's lowering organic waste, methane, and that's a partnership as well that has been joined by a quite good deal of countries and of local governments. So really to unlock some of the finance. And here it was said to reduce 1 ton of methane, you need 10 million to in terms of investment. So there's something to look at here as well. So that was the second point. And the third is we have to look at the sustainability. Often enough, it's not enough to have the capex and have an infrastructure investment that's there. It's about the operating costs, and we have to factor that in, all the operating costs into things when we get started. And here, creative financing that helps unlock also the operational cost, I think, is absolutely critical. So I hope I've given a couple of ideas and strands where to look as we go forward. Again, there's a support system that's out there that helps with things like regulation, landfill regulation, and so on. There are things that help with the sharing of experience, very important. Looking at some of the regional collaboration, we see some leadership here, for example, in the Latin American region, and so on. So using all of this, because we need all hands on deck to have higher ambition and more action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martina, for your keynote address. Let me just highlight 3 points. You have given so many areas where we need to focus on this very important sector on methane mitigation and how the financing should work. First, thank you for highlighting about global methane pledge, which came at COP26 with 100 countries signing as of now, and which is of course targeting 30% reduction by 2030 at 2020 base level. Second, valorizing organic waste and focusing on economic development, not only for climate mitigation, and of course, linking to food security and upstream activities. And third, how you have given 3 main points for NDCs, especially on investment plans, which can really link waste with economic business models, linking knowledge and financing together. Thank you so much once again for setting the stage and context for a very good session which we are going to discuss. Now I have a great pleasure to invite the next speaker, Anya. She will speak on methane mitigation and waste management, financing components and challenges. Give her a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Anya, floor is yours. Yes. Can you please put the presentation? The first presentation. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I'm here. Oh, Sorry, I'm here to represent ISWA. And I will take you to, I guess, for the climate world and most of the people here to a world which is very much down to earth of the practitioners of waste management and those acting in the sector and what they meet in challenges. And Martina has already kind of paved the floor with her last remarks on question of financing investment, but not only capex but also opex. Yeah. So I gonna highlight some issues on that for you. First of all, I only have 10 minutes, so I cannot talk all the cases. So I restrict myself to something where I'd say, okay, we design and implement ambitious NDCs and projects which actually target the organic waste management in the countries. Yeah. And the aim here is really to divert as much as possible the biodegradable share of waste from landfills to much better uses, avoiding by that the methane formation in the landfills. Yeah. So from here, you could say, from my point of view and of those of most practitioners in the sector, finance opportunity from the climate side are there. We are currently not actually in a lack of money, but it doesn't actually come to the waste sector, as Martina mentioned. Yeah, only very few of that. And on the other hand, this sector has, at relatively low cost, already proven technologies which are readily implementable. So why is not more happening? And this is often what, when you are on the ground, what you ask yourself. So first of all, I want to take you a bit to the environment in which the sector is actually operating. And this is only a few bullet points. So, but one of that, which is quite, I think it's quite important, and we are all consumers as well, and we are all waste producers. Yeah, contribution to manage waste, and particularly organic waste, financial contributions, they are not super popular. You know, we all consume and we really love to spend and buy on what we want. And we are really ready to pay for our mobile phone and for our energy and whatever we want in terms of consumption. But then comes the end. And then it's the question, are we ready to pay for the waste which we produce? And in most cases, people actually think this is the edge where they can save on. And for me, in my understanding, the greenhouse gases which we discuss here, they are also waste of our consumption and of our way of living in many ways. Just they're gaseous waste. They're not solid waste, what we talk here. Yeah. But this is an environment in which the sector itself is moving in society, which makes it difficult and also not so popular for decision makers to embark on waste measures. Yeah, that is a hard stuff for a decision maker to take on. And then secondly, we don't have level playing fields. We don't have level playing fields within the sector itself, because usually in most of the countries, landfill or dumping goes for free. Yeah. And you have lots of problems because those those dump sites don't pay the cost and the causes what they cause in the environment. They don't pay for the pollution, not for the emissions of methane. So dumping is cheap. And that is not an environment where someone who is doing bringing organic waste to better uses, mitigating methane, has a good business case and a good life. Yeah. So level playing fields are absolutely required. Waste is mobile. It's very different from wastewater. Wastewater, you know, you drink water, you produce water, it goes down the pipe and it goes to a treatment plant and can usually not run nowhere, or there's a truck coming. Yeah. So in most cases, waste is mobile. Waste can go to the cheapest way of disposal or treatment. So we have to really look into level playing fields inside the sector, but not only there, but also outside. Yeah, as long as artificial fertilizers, for example, or fossil fuel is heavily subsidized But then you ask, why is the biogas so expensive, or why is it such a big investment? Yeah. Then you are not on a level playing field. Yeah. Or if you want to sell organic fertilizer on the market with a heavily subsidized artificial fertilizer market, that's not so easy. So level playing fields, access also to energy grids or to other kinds of distribution. There are lots of different things which we meet which are not level playing field as waste practitioners. And last but not least, we are selling a product as waste practitioners. Yeah. So we need a market, and we need also probably even support on the demand side here. Yeah. So this is the environment, and these only few points I just grabbed from this environment just to take you into the scene, looking up from the waste to the sky where the methane is. Yeah. So finance. Martina already mentioned it. We have finance for the investment side, or at least we have offers for the investment side, often also for the planning and permitting and others. These investment costs, which are given to you once, they drive down your capital costs. They drive down more or less your OPEX, because there is no difference between that. Your OPEX must include a depreciation. It includes the capital costs. So yes, support on investment is good because it helps you with your OPEX, but it doesn't make things go away. You still have your running costs. And you have your running costs as waste treatment facilities. You have it also in the informal sector. Yeah, you have these running costs even if you prevent waste or redistribute food. Yeah, so the costs are there. And I think we all know how this cost breakdown usually generates. That's the idea. But we need a financial balance for what we do. Yeah. And it's only the financial balance which allows us to be sustainable. So where does the revenue come from? That is the main question. So when you look into what practitioners are usually good at, it's the market for materials and goods. So if you produce something, you know your customer probably. You try to get a best compost so that the farmer buys it at highest price. Yeah, this is what you know because you know what you deal with and you know where you want to go to. Yeah, so now this is simply not enough in almost every case of every waste treatment, let alone avoidance or redistribution. Yeah. If we are solely depending on market, usually the operation starves out. So now the question is the government, or are we implementing the polluter pays principle, for example? Is there a gate fee? Are there charges from the waste generator? Yes or no? And if so, how high? Is there a budget transfer, for example, which is usually happening in most of your countries, that there's budget from the national level transfer to the municipalities in order to provide waste management services? Most cases, it is not enough. It only pays a part of the trick. And yes, government has also the possibility to put subsidies, incentives, whatsoever, but these are also very scarce in the sector. So now the new player, which we talk about climate finance, is also the carbon market, of course. So you can trade your GHG emissions, which are avoided. That's a new option, but it's a buyer's market. Yeah. And it's also not a market which will give you the full financing of your operations. So that means that in the end, as a waste practitioner, you're not only running a facility, and doing the accounting on one side, you also faced with these multiple revenue sources which you have to kind of open up to be able to survive. Yeah. And climate finance is only a part of it. Climate finance is only doing the trick on the carbon market, on the investment side, as Martina mentioned, maybe driving down your capital cost, your interest a little bit, probably something through the budget transfer, but it's not going to help you. And also avoided cost, which everyone often talks, doesn't help you because avoided costs don't feed your budget. Yeah. So And now, okay, so now looking into your revenue sources, the players and their particular interests, this is manifold. So as a practitioner, there's the capital market. Okay, these guys, they will look into your credit worthiness. They want guarantees, they want return on investment, yeah? And they look into project size and transaction cost. And here comes what we facing. Small projects are really not so interesting for the capital market. High transaction costs, small project sizes, yeah, probably fragile credit worthiness, yeah, less guarantee behind it. So that is so hard to get into the capital market. Let it be development banks, private equity, national banks. It's not easy for the waste sector, yeah, because they want your business case, yeah. So, and they might give you also very bad interest rates because they find that you're a risky customer as a waste practitioner. You have the goods and materials market. That's the market you know. They want your reliable quality and quantity of product. And they look at price and there's a demand fluctuation and things are, you are on the market. Yeah. So the price you get is not always the same and you won't know it in advance very often. Yeah. And then there's the carbon market. They look into something totally different. They want your avoided greenhouse gas emissions. So they want a different type of accountability. And this is only the market side. Then we have the general budget who transfers, probably under some conditions, something for you. Yeah. The question is, can we actually get something from the waste generators? Do they pay a waste fee, or is there a producer responsibility scheme, for example, for paper? And how high is willingness and ability to pay? Because that is also limited in many countries. What service can we provide? Yeah, what do we need on this edge? And then often there's another player on the ground in many of the low and middle income countries. That's the development aid. And they also have their specific agenda. Yeah. So all these guys are around you as a waste practitioner. And now you have to handle them. And that is super difficult. I can tell you. So from here, now they want to have me stuck with that one. I take you to the last slide. Ambitious NDCs for organic waste sector are extremely relevant, yes, but not fragmented, not only to the sector, yeah? We need to respect the waste hierarchy, as Martina pointed out. We need to define what's conditional and unconditional aspects very clearly. But it's super important that the government looks into how do I actually implement this NDC if I promise it. Yeah. And here you must break the silo thinking. Okay, the waste sector alone will do the trick. Yeah. You must look into providing these level playing fields. Yeah. How can we actually have access? Where's the economic instrument? So we are not thinking in this one silo. Yeah, it's a more complex issue in a country to provide the possibilities, let alone, for example, I know Ghana is here, yeah, has done a lot in actually enabling actors on the ground, not only waste practitioners, to be able to access Article 6, yeah, to tender, yeah. There's a lot of things around that, and we need to think not only in the NDC, we need to think in how we implement it, and then we can promise, and then we can see what we can promise conditional and unconditional. And we have time to do that now. And so my final call here from the ISWA side would come to us, come to talk to the sectors, talk to the sector in your country, and be more integrative. Not only the municipalities, also private sector. Look into how we can make this work, because the waste sector can do things cheaply and well, yeah, but we need to have the environment. So thank you for your attention, and yeah, I would pass now the word to back to you, Pradeep, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Anya, for really putting the context in the overall where how the NDCs will get involved or should be involved with a very ambitious plan. You raised many important issues, but let me just highlight 4 of them briefly. One is the enabling environment is not there. Excellent point. Because waste management is not a priority. Of course, you use word sexy, but I put priority for political leaders, mayors, and others. Waste management is somebody else's problem. We just want clean, hygiene streets, houses, but waste management somebody must take care of. And that's where the public awareness becomes a starting point. There's no level play field within the sector, between the sectors. Excellent point. Thank you, Anya, for that. Financial balance in biodegradable waste treatment is multi-source, but also not always sustainable. Climate finance is only part of solution. We need revenue sources from many areas, including how to have economies of scales and reduce high transactional costs on waste management side. And of course, we need to have ambitious NDCs for organic waste sector. And that becomes highly relevant, and that's where COP29 is focusing on. So thank you for that. Now it's my great pleasure to invite our Chief Executive Officer, World Biogas Association, Charlotte Morton, OBE, to speak on unlocking the potential for scaling up financing of methane mitigation for solid waste management. Charlotte, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I hope we have a new presentation. Brilliant. So, Anya, you've done a great job of highlighting some of the key issues that we have as a sector. I just want to highlight a few of them, the biggest ones, before introducing the G20 paper that the World Biogas Association co-authored. The biggest challenge, as Anya has so well highlighted, is the fact that the internal rate of return for project developers and investors is never quite high enough, or very rarely high enough, for the very considerable range of risks involved in developing what is effectively a circular economy process. Far more risks than for, say, developing a solar or wind project. So that is the primary challenge that we are constantly seeking to address. And that's also exacerbated by the fact that we're still living in a world where industries that are causing immense harm, examples emitting methane, emitting emissions, causing biodiversity loss, still don't have to pay for the harm that they're causing. Indeed, that's why we're in the crisis that we're in, why we are all here at COP. And even worse, especially in case of the fossil fuel industries, we collectively, governments collectively, are still giving enormous subsidies to these industries. According to the IMF, subsidies to the fossil fuel industry reached a whopping $7 trillion in 2022. $7 trillion. So it's very challenging for green sectors to compete in this exceedingly unlevel playing field. Yet in treating and recycling the vast volumes of organic waste we humans are creating, 105 billion tons annually, every year the biogas industry delivers enormous value. If I can make this work. You will see here on this slide a list of all of the services, and no doubt there are more, that the industry is delivering. We're extracting the energy that all those organic wastes contain. If we were to do the whole of the organic wastes that are collectible, there's around 1/3 of today's natural gas consumption in those organic wastes. We recycle and recover the nutrients, the NPK, that are still in those organic wastes. We're able to support carbon sequestration in soils. We're able to improve air quality, reduce odor, and actually one of the most important things we do is prevent water contamination, which has reached an alarming level. Delivering energy and food security on top of all of that. And it's a huge economic opportunity with the potential to create 10 to 15 million green jobs around the world on top of it all. In the process, we would deliver 50% to the global methane pledge, which would prevent 0.1 of a degree of temperature rise. We'd reduce total global greenhouse gas emissions by 11% and turn those wastes, as I say, into numerous valuable products that actually we need. In overall, AD significantly contributes to at least 9 of the 17 UN SDGs. But today, the industry is really only rewarded for the green energy that it's produced. We don't get the price for biofertilizers. In fact, in many cases, it's a cost. So what we need to be doing is to be rewarding the industry for the enormous value that it's delivering and ensuring that it's not today dependent on subsidies to make the financial case. If we were instead to be rewarded financially for all of the value that I've just outlined, the IRR would be really exciting. And I can assure you that money would move into this sector very, very fast indeed. So, having set the scene, supporting Anya's excellent overview of the challenges for an industry that recycles organic wastes, let me turn to the G20 paper that the World Biogas Association authored together with the International Solid Waste Association, ISWA, and the Energy and Resources Institute, TERI. And one good thing, I think, is the fact that this is a G20 paper that was published, which does show that there is growing recognition of the need to cut methane emissions from the waste sector. So the report basically made 2 recommendations for unlocking finance in the waste sector. Promoting waste segregation, which is also really important in terms of reducing waste arisings in the first place. If you separate out food waste, for example, you start to look at it and you realize you are wasting more food than you should be, and you start to reduce it. And the evidence is that you could be reducing food waste arisings by as much as 14%. And the resources in that are enormous. So that in itself is a huge saving. And then, of course, there's the recycling of that into new products. But today, 2.7 billion people on the planet still lack any formal waste collection process. So methane emissions are still rising, and that will continue to, and those emissions will continue to rise as the population rises. And methane abatement accounts for only 2% of climate finance today, just 2%, despite the importance of it. And if we look at the organic fraction of the waste stream today, the majority of the waste stream, over 50%, represents over 50% of the organic fraction in most regions of the world. So it's hugely important that we address that fraction in particular. But if you look at this slide, if you can see it, that it is only the tiny blue fraction in this, on that pie chart, that represents the money that's going into treating organic waste in the right way. The vast, vast majority of financing is heavily weighted towards more capital-intense solutions, which actually are at the bottom of the waste hierarchy. So we're losing enormous value from those wastes. We're preventing the reduction of waste in the first place, and we're preventing industries from turning that material into valuable products. So what are the recommendations? The 2 main recommendations are, in the first place, 1, we must valorize methane abatement. And the best way to do that is to put a value on methane in emissions trading schemes. Today, most of the emissions trading schemes don't do that. The EU emissions trading scheme will be adding a price to methane from 2026. India is now developing its emissions trading scheme, so it's a huge opportunity to ensure that methane does get the value that it deserves. And there's a lot more that governments can do to ensure that, even from the voluntary carbon market, methane gets a price, effectively to ensure that that internal rate of return starts to become a viable return for investors. It's also important to think about setting a floor price on methane to ensure that it gets a high enough price when on the carbon markets. And one more point here is to make sure that we look at properly pricing the social cost of those emissions in those trading schemes, rather than using the measures that we do today, such as the global warming potential metric. And we've already highlighted that the global warming potential of methane is actually, we should be looking at the GWP 20 measure, where methane is 86 times more potent to CO2 in its first 20 years of life, rather than the metric on the GWP 100. The second recommendation is to ensure that there is direct financing that goes to waste collection and treatment. There are many sources of finance that could be going to the development of separate collections and the management of biodegradable wastes. And those funds should be prioritizing the investment in waste collection infrastructure, so that the treatment technologies have access to that organic material in particular. And one of the most important things that should be recognized is the waste hierarchy, so that technologies that extract the most value from those wastes are prioritized over those technologies that are failing to capture that value and failing to reduce the value, which is what is happening today. And why should we care? I think I highlighted earlier on quite the value that recycling organic waste in particular delivers. But I think if you can see here that if we just captured 50% of the food waste that we are producing globally, which is scandalous in itself, but if we could do just that, that would enable 20 million tons of methane to be abated annually. And the avoided social costs would be of the order of $20 to $80 billion per year. So this matters. Thank you very much.
Charlotte, thank you very much for excellent presentation. You highlighted many issues under your presentation, especially linking to WBA ISWA G20 policy paper, which we presented in Brazil. So we are very happy that we were part of G20 process under track for T20 track on methane mitigation from solid waste. When we talk about biogas industry and anaerobic digestion, it's not a brainer. It is so much linked to waste management and turning waste into wealth. We are talking about wind on renewable energy, clean energy source. We are talking about waste management, which is very much required. We are talking about biofertilizer, which yet to take off as a business model, most of the countries. And we are talking about air, soil, water quality, health, pollution control, all these things coming together. And most importantly, it is linking to food security, circular economy, and of course, we are talking about economic returns, jobs, opportunities, which we feel is almost 10 to 15 million annually in the supply chain of waste management linking to biogas and AD sector. G20 papers, excellent points on preventing or promoting waste segregation, which becomes very important, and of course, turning waste into a resource, waste into wealth. And your recommendations are just to the point. I'll just point out on the trading, how we can include methane into trading schemes, which I think should be very, very important for relevant for all of us. And I hope there'll be a very clear direction given at this COP29 to this very important sector, setting floor price, and of course, including social costs, which we often ignore. So now I have a pleasure to invite our next speaker, Alfredo Miranda, who will speak on very important topic. Let me see. methane finance, barriers and solutions in the solid waste sector. Alfredo, floor is yours. Thank you.
Great. Can I please have the presentation? There we go. Thank you very much. Excellent. Well, I'm very happy to be here with you. I'm stepping in for my colleague Jonathan Banks, who couldn't make it because he lost his voice mysteriously yesterday. So apologies for that, but thank you for having me. So today I will be talking to you about methane finance, barriers and solutions to the solid waste sector. I would like to start by saying that if we're able to work on the waste sector, if we're able to do something about the solid waste part, we're going to be able to mitigate 0.05 degrees of global warming. This will bring about $100 billion in direct economic benefits to our societies in different types of forms. And furthermore, about 80%, sorry about that, about 80% of the methane emissions that we would be able to control are basically at a very low cost and very easy way to implement. So this is something that we have to remember. People keep mentioning the sprint parts. This is definitely part of the sprint part, and we're sprinting because this is high priority, easy to achieve, and easier to achieve than other solutions. Despite this, the amount of investment happening in the methane sector is sorry about that. I just remembered this. Okay, thank you very much. So despite the investment needed, we are nowhere near the amounts that are actually necessary. So for example, between 2021 and 2022, we had roughly about $13.7 billion invested in the methane sector. However, we are actually needing around 20 billion currently, and we expect that by 2030, this amount will be closer to 48 billion, and by 2050, it'll be 119 billion. So what we can see is that we are underspending in order to be able to reduce methane emissions. And much of this investment needs to go to the global south. About 158 countries have signed to the Global Methane Pledge. 100 of these signatories are in the global south and are eligible for overseas development assistance. There's a lot of barriers preventing investments in methane mitigation, which is why the projects aren't happening on their own at the moment. For example, in the waste sector, many countries lack waste management mandates and waste disposal tariffs, as Anya was mentioning, which provide a critical revenue stream for waste disposal. There's also not markets for compost and other products from the organic waste management, reducing the value of this revenue stream. There's also many challenges related to risk perception for new technologies and practices and coordinating on waste methane mitigation between national and local jurisdictions. In order to overcome these barriers, we need targeted international financial support to develop bankable methane mitigation projects. Beyond the limited funding delivered to methane mitigation and the complexity of individual projects, other structural barriers related to the existing climate finance architecture have meant that development and climate funds have often overlooked methane mitigation opportunities. Until now, methane mitigation has not been prioritized in donor climate goals and strategies. Institutions do not have methane champions. And methane doesn't fit neatly into institutional verticals because it goes across several sectors. So without tracking and measurement, there is not an easy way to identify methane mitigation projects and evaluate their impact. Furthermore, donor governments have not put forward requests for methane mitigation, largely because they don't have high quality, bankable projects pipelines ready to go. Because of the project complexity and limited information on best practices and technologies, many countries lack the capacity to prepare methane mitigation projects for international investment. So from our experience, our recommendations address a range of actors that need to play a role in providing, requesting, and facilitating financial support for methane mitigation. Multilateral development banks and climate funds can do a lot more to promote methane mitigation alongside development objectives, including assigning a champion to promote methane across different funding programs. We also suggest that they start tracking and measuring methane finance and outcomes to enable goal setting and accountability. Developing countries can also better prioritize methane mitigation by not only developing methane action plans, but also taking the next step to define investable methane mitigation project pipelines. Then they would be well positioned to be able to receive financial support and for project implementation. And very importantly, donor governments must fulfill the methane finance sprint and deliver funds to impactful projects. So again, let's have a look at the funding. The solid waste and wastewater received close to 6 billion in finance in 2022. This is a decrease of 1 billion with respect to the previous period, and it's a lot lower than the 20 billion that we need annually. Furthermore, about 90%, more than 90% of the funding was directed to waste to energy incineration, which is exactly what Martina was mentioning before. So we need a lot more funding, and we need a lot more funding for landfill gas capture, anaerobic digestion, compost, and other organic waste management solutions. We cannot allow this to continue. We know the solid waste methane solutions. We need to prevent waste prevent minimization and food rescue, source separation, organic waste diversion and treatment, improve design and operation of the disposal sites. And in terms of the key barriers that we have seen and that many of you have spoken about before, there's financial, regulatory, capacity and coordination, data, and also the public. So we have, we have come against this item of lack of finance. About, Anya mentioned we like to pay for our iPhones, but we don't like to pay for a good waste disposal service. And just to give you an example, for example, in Peru, the average household for waste collection they're spending about $2.14. In contrast, in Ecuador and Colombia and Chile, this ranges between $6 and $8. And it is well below what is currently needed as well to be able to solve the problem. In terms of regulatory barriers, we have a lack of waste management mandates and enforcement. There's also no incentives for municipalities who often hold the responsibility for coordinating this to actually coordinate among each other. We have limited local expertise, so lack of capacity. We don't necessarily have the data to be able to understand the project and the complexity of the issue to solve at hand. And this data is needed to be able to demonstrate that the investment is needed. And finally, there's always resistance from the public. And this can especially to anything that is new. So it's important to be able to communicate with them. And this is my last slide. What do we see that is very important moving forward? We need more funding from donors to be able to develop the project pipelines that I have so much mentioned. We have to have enabling environments and support the implementation of infrastructure projects. We need also blended finance vehicles to lower the perceived risk of organic diversion solutions and other circular economy alternatives. And to reiterate, we need tariffs and disposal fees that are designed to both be affordable, but also cover the operating costs to make projects sustainable. And lastly, we need markets that are developed for the byproducts, for the compost, for the digestates, for the energy, for the heat. So this is all. Thank you very much.
Alfredo, thank you very much for your insightful presentation. You really brought out many key issues, including how we can enhance, increase methane financing in Global South, very important. Investment in methane mitigation is fraction of the need. Charlotte already mentioned earlier that it is 2% of total climate financing going to others all over sectors. Third, there are structural and funding constraints prevent investment in methane mitigation, and that we need to address on priority. Four, everyone must act rapidly now. And it's time to scale up methane investments. There are supply side recommendations, demand side, and of course, donors, government cooperation to make it happen. And of course, key barriers in terms of financial, regulator, capacity, data, and of course, public awareness, participation become very relevant. Thank you so much for highlighting all these issues in your presentation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure to invite our last speaker for this session before we open the floor for discussions and, of course, interaction. And please keep your questions ready for the panelists and others, because before I go back to panel for a set of questions, I would like to open the floor for a few minutes for anybody to ask for any question or make some brief comment. So may I request now Yannick Quack to speak on and give his presentation, leveraging the EU ETS and EV taxonomy for sustainable waste management funding. Floor is yours, Yannick.
Slides. Okay. I think actually a lot has been said already. But I'll try to build on what has been said. The most important thing I think was mentioned by Anya, particularly there is no level playing field, and this is particularly the case for the organics. For the other waste streams, we have some financing schemes such as EPR, extended producer responsibility schemes, but for the organics, there's nothing really in place. So all the costs end up with the municipalities. I will build on a project that we are doing currently. So it's called Biogas, where we studied the financial schemes or financial economic incentives available, or let's say that need to be in place in order to have a proper a level playing field to encourage high level collection and treatment of bio-waste. So I think it's been said a couple of times, but still it's quite shocking that methane is actually, or the waste sector is one of the largest sources of methane in Europe. So it's the second largest and third globally, only after agriculture. So it's quite shocking that it's so high in Europe. You know, we are always say that we are kind of proud for having our best practices in Europe, and we sometimes even try to export them to other countries. I think maybe there are things to learn from other countries. When it comes to the sources of the emissions, then clearly the solid waste disposal is the number one. So it's 80% in Europe. But I would like to highlight this is not actually the real figure, because what we know is that some more is reported under the energy sector, where the waste energy incineration emissions are reported. So I think if you look at the figure on the right, I spent 1 month of my time with a couple of volunteers to figure out actually the statistics, like how much is incinerated and how much is biogenic and how much is the fossil. It's the reporting is a mess. I think some countries are just, assuming it. So I think the actual figure would be probably much higher. The other sectors are also important, of course, the wastewater treatment and biological treatment of solid waste. But yeah, clearly landfilling is the largest source of methane in Europe and, well, also globally when we talk about the waste sector. So what is happening? What's this here? So we just published a report 2 weeks ago, looking into how much bio-waste is generated in Europe and how much is captured. And unfortunately, the figure here, as you can see, we're only capturing 26% of kitchen waste, doing slightly better in terms of when you put it together with the garden waste. So it's the bio-waste in total 45%, but there is a huge potential to improve that. But how to improve it? That's the question. And I think economic incentives here play a huge role. Sorry. Yeah. So before going into economics, just to give some reasons for why we should be collecting and managing bio-waste. I guess in Europe, it's the largest fraction of waste, as said. It's more than 50% in other regions. It's absolutely important to meet recycling targets, because without pulling out bio-waste, there's no way we can collect other materials separately, or even sort, like to segregate and have clean streams. Yes, closer. Okay. Sorry. I hope you heard. I don't have to repeat. I'm willing to do that if we have time. So yes, so it's also important for the climate. You know, we are talking here about the methane. It's clearly important source, and in Europe we also have a separate collection made mandatory from this year. All these are kind of important reasons for why we should be collecting managing bio-waste. So what is needed to make this happen? So first of all, of course, we need to have a governance in place. We already have in Europe. I don't know how is it in other regions. I doubt there is a lot of separate collection for bio-waste. But we have a mandatory collection of bio-waste. It's a good start. It's not enough by itself, because obviously you could be meeting it just by putting a container on the street and asking people just throw whatever, you know, in there. That's not a good practice. And that's why that leads to my second one, which is you need to have a best practices. So good collection systems and not just any system. Finally is the level playing field and making the collection and treatment cost effective or competitive, really to say, and the funding in itself. So for the last few days, we have been discussing how to make it happen at the national level. So we have a scheme here. Many of the things we already mentioned, to have a disposal taxes. I would like to highlight we should not only have a disposal taxes on landfills, but also on incinerators, because we know that in Europe, for example, a lot of organic waste is actually incinerated, much more incinerated than landfilled. So we should not forget about that. And it's also important to have a response systems, so ensure that those disposal taxes and incineration taxes, they actually end up financing municipalities and so on. But anyway, what I really want to discuss today were the economical barriers and how to finance things at the kind of EU or global level. So in our bio-based study, we identified a number of barriers, and I think it's valid for all the regions. That's clearly not enough resources, particularly for the expensive infrastructure such as biogas, composting, treatment plants. Collection is also still much more expensive than for the residual waste. And yeah, as I said, like there's a lack of resources to build facilities. Yeah, so now it becomes the tricky part. So how to, and particularly you know, doesn't really have a much say about the fiscal policies. This is something that the member states have to decide about it. But there are a couple of things they can influence the, you know, by giving guidelines or investments. And of course, also there are available EU funds. So this is a way to finance these things. But I just wanted to put it an interesting discussion we were having on LinkedIn with some of the experts. What is happening in the UK now? It's not only happening in the UK; it's actually happening everywhere, I would say. So a good example was one of the industries closing their recycling plant, which were operational just for 2 years, and then the day after announcing that they will be doing waste to energy. So this is how the economics is at the moment. It's really geared towards waste incineration, and that's the problem. So what can we do? I'm not going to talk about the local level things, so I wanted to focus really on some of the things that we already mentioned, so carbon markets and the EU taxonomy for supporting bio-waste management. And I hope these are maybe things that can be also replicated in other places. They're both very controversial for the reasons like anything is controversial if you don't do it properly. So EU emission trading system, as you know, it's a cap and trade system. So it's basically puts a carbon price on the CO2 emitted, and the cap, which is the amount you can emit, it's decreasing year after year. And it's a good source actually to generate funds. So for the CO2, the money that is raised is used, for example, to distribute it via Innovation Fund and also the Modernization Fund. When it comes to EU taxonomy, and then this is a classification system, very important, because we also need to know what we can consider as a sustainable or green activity. So what the EU taxonomy does, it creates this clarity in terms of where to invest. And very importantly, it also includes do no significant harm. So meaning that any activity where you invest should also not harm other environmental objectives. So these two tools could be very important for the waste management if they are done, of course, properly. So just zooming in very quickly on EU ETS and waste management. So currently the ETS already covers some waste treatment activities such as co-incineration. Well, if you can consider it as a waste treatment, because it's really about burning, but it excludes municipal solid waste incineration and landfilling. So only a few countries in Europe have voluntarily included. So it's Denmark, Sweden, and Germany. And so what would be the potential impact of inclusion? So if you included incinerators and landfills, it would make both of them more expensive. So it would come on top of already existing fees. The problem with the current fees, for example, on landfilling and incineration, as mentioned by, I think, Anja, that they are often very low or even non-existing. So there are quite a number of countries that have landfill fees, and there are almost no incineration taxes. If they exist, they are around 5, 10 euros, 15 euros maybe, very, very low. So they don't really do much. And that's why an ETS could be an important tool. The current ETS price, for example, is around 80 euros or 60. It fluctuates. So that really helps to change the things. So I just wanted to show what it means in practice. So what we recommend, and which is not the case, is of course to include both of them, and to make sure that the revenues from those activities are invested in waste management. But it's what is, and this is happening, well, it should happen very soon. So the European Commission is tasked to include, to consider the inclusion of incinerators and landfilling by 2026, with a potential inclusion in 2028. And yeah, just on the right side, you can see like what that would mean, for example, for an incinerator. It would increase the cost of a typical incinerator significantly. So we are talking about 6 to 8 million euros per year extra cost. So yeah, just to give you an example, the importance of CO2 tax and ETS in general. Here I have an example from Stockholm, where because when the ETS price became high enough, the facility started to sort the waste before it was incinerated, which actually removed a lot of materials, particularly plastics, but also metals, even organics. And it saves just for one facility 43 tons per year. We are hoping that this will be scaled up everywhere, and not only in front of incinerators, but really in front of anything, also landfills. Also quickly about taxonomy. I hope I still have some time. Yeah. Okay. So as I said, so taxonomy also has a dual role because it's meant to give guidance for banks, investors, what is sustainable, and at the same time it also says like what is not sustainable, and therefore diverts the money away from kind of this end of pipe technologies towards activities more like separate collection, material recovery, composting, biogas. So it's an actually important tool, and it could just on the right side I put that we have had taxonomy since, if I'm not wrong, since a few years. I'm not sure exactly when the climate taxonomy came out. I know that the circular economy taxonomy came out just last year, but there's still not really a data about it. But the climate taxonomy, it shows that it really works. So a lot of money is being invested in green activities, in so-called sustainable activities. So it works, and if we started to apply that on waste management activities and with a clear criteria, specifications for the exclusion of certain activities, then it can have a huge impact. So yeah, and also from the bio-waste project, what we saw is that particularly the do-no significant harm principle is important. And it's really having an effect on financing, but unfortunately, stricter monitoring is needed because we still see a lot of countries trying to somehow misallocate the funds, if that's the word. Yeah, so it's very important that we have for all kinds of funds very clear funding criteria, which makes sure that it specifies where the money should go, and it should really specify like what kind of activities are supported, rather than like, for example, often we hear about integrated waste management. It's a big word, and it includes a lot of many different things, including incineration, for example. So that should not happen. And yeah, so my conclusion is that ETS and taxonomy, they could really be additional for disposal taxes and some other fees, and bring funds for important investments. So for building particularly new treatment facilities and financing the infrastructure. And it's and same for it's important that but it's the specification of where the funding goes. It's has to be clarified, and also not maybe done. Sorry, Spanish came in. Not too cumbersome for the activities that are included. So it also has to be reasonable, I would say. So I'll stop here, and just wanted to say, like, we will have our new guidance coming out in December, so watch out for that. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Yannick, for really highlighting EU ETS and EU taxonomy for sustainable waste management funding. Excellent presentation. Colleagues, friends, we have a problem here on the time management. So we have only 10-12 minutes left. So I would like to ask rapid questions. Anything anybody would like to highlight? Please be brief, only question and not long comments. Yes, please continue. And then I'll just come to one question each for 2 to 3 minutes to all panelists. So be ready, please, out of those 3 questions which I'll be asking. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Shibu. I'm from India. I represent Gaia here. I work a lot on biogas and organics management in India and Asia Pacific region. I have some concerns around the finance. While we are talking about finance, one of the dangers awaiting is the finance getting allocated more into bio-CNG plants, the large-scale centralized facilities. That is going to be a kind of a problem because you have to transport quality organic waste in terms of like 500 tons or 600 tons for 22 kilometers into one place. You are additional fuel emission, emission is coming up. So that is one issue. Second, the access and accessibility to quality finance. The mention about iPhone, sir. People are buying iPhone because you can buy it in EMIs. You just pay 2,000 rupees and then you can pay monthly 2,000 rupees and you can get it. But a biogas plant, you can't buy it.
Can you be brief, please?
Yeah, I'm just adding. So the biogas, the business, they need finance for giving it credit because you have to pay upfront amount. That is making it accessibility issue. And the other thing is that there is a kind of a de-education is needed. People are still in the old age of biogas, and that notion is still there. That is the one of the major factor where people say no to biogas when it comes to as an option for organics. We have new technology, we have compact designs, but they need a kind of a additional finance for creating an enabling environment that actually compel people to use it. When it is available at a affordable cost, this will be done. But unfortunately, the thing is that people are now moving away from decentralized small scale biogas plants. India, you just consider India. The market is big, but it is going towards, right now the trend is towards bio-CNG, which is large scale, only affordable by the large scale companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting comments, and of course, I'm sure our panelists will do it. Can you be very brief because we have just 1 minute each? Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. So, Joukasalo from Finland, and I specialize in methane mapping and quantification. But what's the role of reporting and actually quantifying of methane emissions from landfills and including that into the pricing schemes? Because we see that, for example, in EU there is a new methane regulation, but the landfill area is not included, which makes no bloody sense. But excuse me there. But I think that, as we see in oil and gas, that the OGMP framework has been very effective, and kind of, how do you see this as a part of the finding finance sources?
Thank you so much. Do you have any questions? Okay, please be brief. Yeah.
My name is Mohammed from UAE. We are a circular economy company committed to closed loop recycling. UAE is known to be one of the largest per capita waste generation. My question is regarding the generation of the waste. We're expecting EPR to set up next 2 years or so. How does it help in terms of the waste generation, if someone can ask us? Because we're thinking it's going to be a magic bullet for us. So
thank you so much. 3 comments and questions, and I leave my eminent panelists to speak. Maybe Yannick can also cover later on the EU ETS side. So we have these 3 questions revolving around financing mechanisms, policy frameworks, and of course, capital market and banks. So Martina, I'll begin with you. Just pick up any topic you would like to say on financing side or on regulatory side on NDCs. Then pass on to Anya on the capital markets, and then I'll pass on to Charlotte on policy frameworks, and then of course I leave to Yannick and of course Alfredo to speak any point, but panelists have spoken. Martina, over to you.
Well, thank you. Maybe briefly, I mean, you heard me say that the NDCs, I think, are really absolutely critical to give the right signal for the money to follow that level of commitment. So that's definitely one area. There's support that's there to help include the waste sector into the NDCs. And the same goes if we talk about financing, and I will take only the snippet of really small parts of finance, but sometimes this small part of finance, this glue finance, is really critical to unlock bigger financing as well. And that's something we can do with the trust fund. And we have an expression of interest call out there. So for countries who are interested in submitting something, and maybe I leave it at that. And I come back to one point that was raised from the audience. We set up in the CCAC the OGMP. Now it's run through SWAMU, but we set it up at the time. But it's powerful because it provides the methodology for an industry to measure at their asset level. Now it's a whole different ballgame. Obviously, if we look at the operations and at the landfill, the cycles, it's not every time the same, and so on. And yes, there will be information available via satellites, but I think we need a lot of ground truthing as well. And one of my dream projects is, can we involve waste pickers in helping with the measurements? And that's a steep call. Some may say, oh, this is naive, this is crazy, but we have to find a way to get them in and maybe helping with the measurement with drones, teaching them, training them. And if there's a will, there's a way, and maybe we can pull that off.
Speakers. That's an excellent point. Yes. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I try to be brief, and I want to dwell on 2 points which my fellow speakers actually mentioned. One was Charlotte highlighting the enormous benefit which we don't lift for society by not addressing and treating organic waste properly. But yeah, and on the other hand, we heard a lot about bankable projects, and I was talking about the capital sector being crucial to unlock the investment. And here we have we have it on the table. If society is profiting, not necessarily the capital market is profiting from that. Yeah. So how do we actually shape our investments in the capital market are important. And as I said, they like big projects, they like the guarantees and so on. So no wonder that waste treatment technologies which deliver that get favored over other waste treatment technologies. So it's not absolutely, I have to say from ISWA, it's not the fault of an incinerator. Incineration is part of the waste hierarchy and it has its place. But if it is the only technology which is financed for a country, yeah, then we have a problem here because also incinerators don't want to burn waste. Don't want to burn water. So they look into being a piece of a functioning waste system, and it starts with prevention, segregation, the organic, in having the investment in all these other technologies. And the same accounts for landfills. Big landfills, investors are happy with that. Yeah, but they give us a problem because more methane will be produced and emitted than we can capture. So how, and this is my major question for the audience and a takeaway here, how can we get this finance and especially the capital sector in taking up all the projects which we need, which we talk about, and generating this wealth for the society? Yeah, we probably need to talk to them. We need to rethink the way we finance investments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. Over to you, Charlotte.
And I would agree with my Finnish colleague in terms of we need the methane from the landfill charged as well.
Charlotte, over to you, please.
Just 2 quick points really on the point you made around...
Charlotte, can you put the mic closer, please? Yes.
Sorry. Just 2 quick points around the points you made about distance and size of biogas plants and performance of biogas plants, but also the pricing. It is absolutely crucial to ensure that we have an appropriate enabling environment. That's been made several times. So just to highlight one of the projects that the World Biogas Association is in the process of developing and nearly finalized is a model biogas regulatory framework that should ensure that developers can develop biogas projects that do meet the IRR returns required of investors. And secondly, the International AD Certification Scheme, which similarly should ensure that all biogas plants are designed, built and operated well. that has linked to it a standardized methodology for assessing the life cycle impact of a plant, and that can then link to carbon markets. And in the measuring of the life cycle assessment, that should take into account the carbon cost of shipping feedstocks and the overall impact of a particular plant, which should ultimately support the biogas plants that are having the lowest carbon impact. So I hope both of those projects should help address, create the enabling environment and ensure the better performance of biogas plants, both from a health and safety point of view, but also a carbon point of view.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Yannick, Alfredo, we have been told that we have to leave quickly. So 1 minute each, please, quick takeaway from this session.
Yes, I just wanted to comment the methane regulation and ETS together. First of all, I think I do agree with the European Commission when they were considering, not actually include the waste sector, and for the reason that is that the issue is really enforcement. I agree there is much more we can do in terms of, we can have a better regulation, but it's the enforcement which is really not working. And that's why we don't need another regulation. We need really something, financial scheme, such as ETS. And if we include landfilling and incinerators at the same time, then it also will avoid so-called methane to CO2 swap. That we don't want, because I mean, what we see now is that landfill, yes, emissions are decreasing, but at the same time, emissions from incinerators are doubling. So that we don't want. So that's my maybe short answer.
Thank you, Yannick. Alfredo, over to you, please.
Oops. Okay, great, thank you. Super brief regarding, you mentioned OGMP, and I just wanted to say, I think it's worth acknowledging that they're very different sectors with very different number of actors, with very different resources. And so I would just, if you are interested in exploring that option, I would highly recommend you to get in contact with the folks at IMEO, who are already receiving these reports and can probably tell you the difficulties they are encountering in just processing the data that they're getting, so that you can have an idea of the challenges ahead, I guess. No? So in terms of that would be my only piece of advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfredo. Colleagues, friends, give a round of applause to our esteemed panelists. Thank you so much for your presence, and our conversation continues after this session also. Thank you once again for joining us. It's a very important session on methane mitigation financing. Thank you.